little more sunrise stories. This one's called I Learned to Stop Worrying by Watching My Wife Wash Dishes by Reverend William Wood, 204 Hurlburt Street, Charlevoix, Michigan. A few years ago, I was suffering intensely from pains in my stomach. I would awaken 2 or 3 times each night, unable to sleep because of these terrific pains. I had watched my father die from cancer of the stomach, and I feared that I too had a stomach cancer, or at least stomach ulcers. So I went to a clinic for an examination. A renowned stomach specialist examined me with a fluoroscope and took an x-ray of my stomach. He gave me medicine to make me sleep and assured me I had no stomach ulcers or cancer. My pains, he said, were caused by emotional strains. Since I am a minister, one of his first questions was, "Do you have an old crank on your church board?" He told me what I already knew. I was trying to do too much. In addition to my preaching every Sunday and carrying the burdens of the various activities of the church, I was also chairman of the Red Cross, president of the Kiwanis. I also conducted 2 or 3 funerals each week and a number of other activities. I was working under constant pressure. I could never relax. I was always tense, hurried, and high-strung. I got to the point where I was worried about everything. I was living in a constant dither. I was in such pain that I gladly acted on the doctor's advice. I took Monday off each week and began eliminating various responsibilities and activities. One day while cleaning out my desk, I got an idea that proved to be immensely helpful. I was looking over an accumulation of old notes on sermons and other memos on matters that were now past and gone. I crumpled them up one by one and tossed them into the wastebasket. Suddenly I stopped and said to myself, "Bill, why don't you do the same thing with your worries that you are doing with these notes? Why don't you crumple up your worries about yesterday's problems and toss them into the wastebasket?" That one idea gave me immediate inspiration, gave me the feeling of a weight being lifted from my shoulders. From that day to this, I have made it a rule to throw into the wastebasket all the problems that I can no longer do anything about. Then one day, while wiping the dishes as my wife washed them, I got another idea. My wife was singing as she washed the dishes, and I said to myself, "Look, Bill, how happy your wife is. We have been married 18 years, and she has been washing dishes all that time. Suppose when we got married, she had looked ahead and seen all the dishes she would have to wash during those 18 years that stretched ahead. That pile of dirty dishes would be bigger than a barn. The very thought of it would have appalled any woman." Then I said to myself, the reason my wife doesn't mind washing the dishes is because she washes only one day's dishes at a time. I saw what my trouble was. I was trying to wash today's dishes, and yesterday's dishes, and dishes that weren't even dirty yet. I saw how foolish I was acting. I was standing in the pulpit Sunday mornings, telling other people how to live, yet I myself was leading a tense, worried, hurried existence. I felt ashamed of myself. Worries don't bother me anymore. No more stomach pains, no more insomnia. I now crumple up yesterday's anxieties and toss them into the wastebasket. I have ceased trying to wash tomorrow's dirty dishes. Today. Do you remember a statement quoted earlier in this book? The load of tomorrow added to that of yesterday carried today makes the strongest falter. Why even try it? See page 2. And the next story. I Found the Answer by Dale Hughs, public accountant, 607 South Euclid Avenue, Bay City, Michigan. In 1943, I landed in a veterans hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. This had happened during a practice marine amphibious landing off the Hawaiian Islands. I was getting ready to jump off the barge onto the beach when a big breaker swept in, lifted the barge, and threw me off balance and smashed me on the sands. I fell with such force that one of my broken ribs punctured my right lung. After spending 3 months in the hospital, I got the biggest shock of my life. The doctors told me that I showed absolutely no improvement. After some serious thinking, I figured that worry was preventing me from getting well. Just a second. Okay, sorry about that. I had to get a little drink. After some serious thinking, I figured that worry was preventing me from getting well. I had been used to a very active life, and during these 3 months, I had been flat on my back, 24 hours a day, with nothing to do but think. The more I thought, the more I worried. I worried about whether I would ever be able to take my place in the world. I worried about whether I would remain a cripple the rest of my life, and about whether I would ever be able to get married and live a normal life. I urged my doctor to move me up to the next ward, which was called the Country Club, because the patients were allowed to do almost anything they cared to do. In this Country Club ward, I became interested in contract bridge. I spent 6 weeks learning the game, playing bridge with the other fellows, and reading Culbertson's books on bridge. After 6 weeks, I was playing nearly every evening for the rest of my stay in the hospital. I also became interested in painting with oils, and I studied this art under an instructor every afternoon from 3 to 5. Some of my paintings were so good that you could almost tell what they were. I also tried my hand at soap and wood carving, and I read a number of books on the subject and found it fascinating. I kept myself so busy that I had no time to worry about my physical condition. I even found time to read books on psychology given to me by the Red Cross. At the end of 3 months, the entire medical staff came to me and congratulated me on making an amazing improvement. Those were the sweetest words I had ever heard since the day I was born. I wanted to shout with joy. The point I am trying to make is this. When I had nothing to do but lie on the flat of my back and worry about my future, I made no improvement whatever. I was poisoning my body with worry. Even the broken ribs wouldn't heal. But as soon as I got my mind off myself by playing contract bridge, painting oil pictures, carving wood, doctors declared I made an amazing improvement. I am now leading a normal, healthy life, and my lungs are as good as yours. Remember what George Bernard Shaw said? The secret of being miserable is to have the leisure to bother about whether you are happy or not. Keep active, keep busy. See page 53. This next one's pretty short. Time Solves a Lot of Things by Louis T. Montant, Jr., Sales and Marketing Analyst, 114 West 64th Street, New York, New York. Worry caused me to lose 10 years of my life. Those 10 years should have been the most fruitful and richest years of any young man's life. The years from 18 to 28. I realize now that losing those years was no one's fault but my own. I worried about everything. My job, my health, my family, and my feelings of inferiority. I was so frightened that I used to cross the street to avoid meeting people I knew. When I met a friend on the street, I would often pretend not to notice him because I was afraid of being snubbed. I was so afraid of meeting strangers, so terrified in their presence, that in one space of 2 weeks I lost out on 3 different jobs, simply because I didn't have the courage to tell those 3 prospective employers what I knew I could do. Then one day 8 years ago, I conquered worry in one afternoon, and I've rarely worried since. Down a little bit, there we go. Then one day 8 years ago, I conquered worry in one afternoon and have rarely worried since then. That afternoon, I was in the office of a man who had far more troubles than I had ever faced. Yet he was one of the most cheerful men I had ever known. He had made a fortune in 1929 and lost every cent. He had made another fortune in 1933 and lost that, and another fortune in 37, and he lost that too. He had gone through bankruptcy and had been hounded by enemies and creditors. Troubles that would have broken some men and driven them to suicide rolled off of him like water off a duck's back. As I said in his office that day 8 years ago, I envied him and wished that God had made me like him. As we were talking, he tossed a letter to me that he had received that morning and said, "Read that." It was an angry letter, raising several embarrassing questions. If I had received such a letter, it would have sent me into a tailspin. I said, "Bill, how are you going to answer it?" "Well," Bill said, "I'll tell you a little secret. Next time you've really got something to worry about, take a pencil and a piece of paper and sit down and write out in detail just what you're worrying about. Then put that piece of paper in the lower right-hand drawer of your desk. Wait a couple weeks and then look at it. If what you wrote down still worries you when you read it, put that piece of paper back in your lower right-hand drawer. Let it sit there for another 2 weeks. It will be safe there. Nothing will happen to it. But in the meantime, a lot may happen to the problem that is worrying you. I have found that if only I have patience, the worry that is trying to harass me will often collapse like a pricked balloon." That bit of advice made a great impression on me. I have been using Bill's advice for years now, and as a result, I rarely worry about anything. Time solves a lot of things. Time may also solve what you are worrying about today. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. This has been a few stories from the final chapter of the book I've been reading you by Dale Carnegie, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Thank you.